Hello, welcome to the last presentation of the day, either mid-afternoon or early afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to talk about this project that I've been working on through the lens of navigating a new role for my library and kind of how those have influenced one another. I am going to go ahead and turn my video off as I'm presenting, just because it's looking a little bit potentially rainy here and I'm trying to save bandwidth. And for some reason, the rain and my internet do not always get along. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop my video now while I'm presenting, and then at Q&A in the end, I'll go ahead and turn it back on. But I did wanna have it on now and just to say welcome and hello. So I will stop it now. Before we get started, I did just want to do some quick intros. So if you could introduce yourself in the chat and just tell me what your first job in libraries was. It could be part-time, full-time, doesn't matter to me. I'm early career, and this position is my first full-time position in libraries. So I am curious to hear what others' experiences have been. If we have any other early career people in the audience today, that would be awesome. You could let me know that too. But yeah, just take a second. Library page in high school. Yeah, I think a lot of people were pages in high school. I did not work in a high school library, so. Hello, early career friend. Thank you so much for sharing. This is great. Circulation, a lot of circulation. Oh, corporate libraries, fascinating. High school circulation, more early careers, hello. Excellent. A lot of circulation, a lot of high school, reference. So many. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, thank you for being here, for spending time with me this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And thanks for introducing yourselves and giving me a little bit of your experience, since I will be spending a lot of time sharing mine. I am going to go ahead real quick before we get started and put the link to my slides in the chat. In case you want to follow along, feel free. But yeah, thank you all so much for sharing your experience. I really appreciate it. So I will go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Grace Therrell, and I use she, her pronouns. I am an online learning librarian and assistant professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. As I just said, I am early career, and this is my first full-time position in libraries. I graduated with my MLIS in 2019 from the University of Denver, and I've been in this position a little over a year and a half. It'll be 2 years in September. Here are objectives for the session today. So one goal I have is just to explore how projects, professional identities, and positions can all influence one another. I'll talk about that throughout the session. And that's been something that I've noticed in my work. And so that's pretty much, that's one of the main reasons that I wanted to share this project through this lens today. My other goal for the session is to encourage us to just reflect on what it means to be persistent and what we need to keep going in our own work. Here is an overview of the session. I'll go ahead and start with my background and institutional context, just to kind of let you know where I'm coming from and situate the discussion. Then I'll move on to discussing how I began navigating a new role and how I initially began thinking about this project in the first 6 months of my position. After that, I'll talk about the switch to emergency remote work that many of us, if not all of us, experienced. And I'll discuss a little bit about how that affected both my position and this project, which is the Bridge project. And I will also go ahead and give an overview of the project at that time. And then to wrap up, I'll discuss what moving forward looks like for me as this project goes out into the world and as I continue to shape this role. I am going to share some concrete details of the Bridge project and what it looks like later on in the session. But for the majority, I'm really just going to be talking a lot about my personal experience and what the past year and a half has looked like for me. As we continue, feel free to add in your thoughts, comments, and experiences in the chat. I've got it open. If anything resonates with you or not, I am happy to hear it. So feel free to add things in the chat and have a discussion as we go on. Just a note before we get started with the session. This session is primarily based on my own lived experience, and we'll discuss how I have viewed persisting in my job. I want to acknowledge that as I talk about the idea of persistence today and what it has meant for me over the last year and a half, I am in a position of many layers of privilege. I am a white, cis, able-bodied woman in a full-time tenure-track faculty position, and I've had a lot of advantages in my work and personal life that have given me space and flexibility to move in a way that's meaningful and comfortable for me, even in the middle of a global health crisis. I want to acknowledge that this is my personal experience. I benefit from existing systems, and what has been possible for me is not universally possible for all. I wanted to give this note also as we think about what persistence means and as we work to dismantle systems of oppression, including traditional resilience and persistence narratives. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is my previous experience in libraries and how that shaped my professional identity and kind of how that fits into my position and how my position fits in the university. I came to UT with about 2 years of experience in libraries. As I saw, a lot of you started your library experiences in graduate school or before then. I started mine in graduate school. I worked as a graduate assistant in an education and outreach department where I got a lot of experience in instruction, reference, and outreach. I also worked in technical areas of librarianship. I did some volunteer cataloging work. I had a scanning job where I wrote metadata. And then I also was a GRA doing scripting for data analysis. So I worked in multiple jobs and in multiple areas of libraries. And I was constantly viewing whatever work I was doing through a fairly holistic lens. When I decided to focus on instruction positions, I knew that understanding libraries more holistically would still be an important perspective to have. And I've been able to bring that into my role, which I will talk about a little later on. With all of my positions in libraries, I was also able to come to full-time work with a pretty solid understanding of what my values were. Through working in an instruction-heavy role, I really solidified my professional identity as a teacher librarian. I view myself as a teacher first, librarian second. And this identity is how I approach my position now, even though it isn't explicitly an instruction position. I also learned that I value collaboration and having multiple active voices in the room. It's really important for me to work together with others, find ways to share power and build collective knowledge. My experience also showed me that I valued reflection and questioning. I thought a lot about pedagogy, which is how and why we teach, but I didn't know to call it that, and was always asking how and why we do what we do. So I brought all of these values to my new role when I started at UT, and they've really been the foundation for the direction I've taken it. So now that I've talked a little bit about where I come from and where I'm situated in librarianship, I want to give a little bit of institutional context. So I work at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville in the university libraries. UTK serves around 30,000 students and is the flagship research university of the state of Tennessee. Our main library is Hodges Library, where I work with additional branch libraries on campus. I work in the Teaching and Learning Programs Department, which was actually created in 2019, just a few months before I began my position. TLP focuses on information literacy instruction for undergraduate students, and then teaching and learning broadly in the libraries. When I arrived in fall 2019, our department had an interim head and also consisted of 2 student success librarians, a GTA, an online learning librarian, and a new instructional designer. My position was posted in summer of 2019 with a start date in the fall. And the new instructional designer actually started his job about a month before I did. So both of our positions were new and we started right around the same time. This position, like his, was brand new to the libraries and also was an addition to the existing online learning librarian. So University of Tennessee has 2 online learning librarians. My position, as well as that instructional designer position, were part of the library's response to a growing institutional focus and a priority on online learning. It was also the first full-time tenure track faculty position in the new teaching and learning programs department. So there was a lot of new. It was a new job for me. It was a new role for the libraries. This was a new focus for the university. So there was just a lot of new happening. I also wanted to give a little bit of background of my position description, because while there are 2 online learning librarians at UT, we have completely different jobs. So my position description was more broad and focused on things like incorporating collections into online learning, teaching others how to teach effectively online, and then supporting online learning initiatives through curation and assessment. My other online learning librarian colleague is responsible more for the technical aspects of online learning, such as creating tutorials, prioritizing accessibility, and then teaching others how to create digital learning objects. And the instructional designer reports to her and helps with those initiatives. We both also have duties in our positions like teaching information literacy sessions, doing reference, participating in outreach events, supporting student success initiatives. And then we're both tenure track faculty members, so we have those expectations as well for publishing and service. It's important to note, like I said, that my position is not a duplication of the other online learning librarian. We have the exact same title, but we have completely different roles, and our position descriptions are also completely different. So that was where I came in when I started my position in fall of 2019. And I want to explain a little bit more about how I began navigating this position and how I started thinking about a project within the first 6 months. Because my position was new to the libraries, there was obviously no roadmap for what the job should look like. No one had been in the role before. And I also didn't know of other institutions with 2 online learning librarians and 2 online learning librarians that did separate work. And I'm still not sure of any. If they exist, that's great. If you know of them, let me know. But that was just something that was really new to me. I could take some of what the other online learning librarian did, and I could take some of what the student success librarians did, but there wasn't anybody else who had my role. And there were no existing relationships to build on. There weren't any existing projects that I could start in on. So like I said, there was just not really a roadmap for what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to approach my position. As an early career librarian, I also had no roadmap for what it meant to be in a full-time position or what was expected of full-time faculty. I had 2 years of experience in graduate school, and as I said, had not volunteered or worked in a library prior to that, not in undergrad, not in high school. I also had little knowledge of tenure track expectations and how I should approach those aspects of my job. So essentially, I was overwhelmed. And I really understood and started grasping that this was a very ambitious job that I had taken on. I knew that, but I think as some of you, or maybe all of you, can probably relate to, you don't know necessarily what to expect out of a role when you take it. An interview does not tell you everything. So when I got into my role, I really realized that I didn't have much to go on, and I was going to have to figure out where the role was going to go. I knew that as I built my position, I needed to balance what I valued with what the institution needed. And I also knew who I was and what I valued as a professional. And now I needed to learn where my position fit in the libraries and what the institution's needs were. To find where my position fit, I did a lot of brainstorming, reflecting, and goal setting. And honestly, this was a little uncomfortable for me. I was focusing on these more abstract intellectual tasks. Honestly, probably for the first 3 months of my position, this was primarily what I was doing. And like I said, it was a little uncomfortable as someone who had just come out of grad school and graduate school positions that are highly focused on tangible work and deliverables. I'm also a very structure-oriented concrete, organized person. So it was hard for me to accept that thinking about my job was work. But this is what I did. And to give it a little bit of structure, I started brainstorming in a journal and taking notes and just trying to define really what my position was and where it fit in the libraries. I wanted to provide some visuals just to show you a little bit of what that looked like. Part of my brainstorming and reflecting was unpacking my position description and trying to figure out what my job was. These two images show me rewording the duties listed in my position description, and then also creating a mind map of important words from the language in it. I did this reflecting and brainstorming and unpacking the PD in combination with talking to my department head, but I really wanted to know what my job was and how I was supposed to approach it. So I thought, let me analyze the PD, and that will help me know how I should do my job. I was still getting used to the idea that I could approach this role in a way that made sense for me and my values. I also brainstormed short and long-term goals, as these two images show. I was not required to have goals my first year, but having goals would give me something tangible and concrete to reference as I tried to navigate my position. Thank you for the handwriting comment. I sometimes have trouble reading it, so I appreciate you saying, like, complimenting my handwriting. That's fun. So yeah, I was doing all of this brainstorming and trying to figure out what are short-term goals for this position? What would long-term goals be? What is the scope? What do I do? What do I not do? And all of these questions and reflecting, this is how I approached my position. And yes, as someone just said in the chat, right, ultimate goal, kill it, was the goal of my job. And that's kind of how I just had to approach these first few months of this position. In addition to trying to figure out where my position fit and what it was, I also needed to understand what the institution needed from my role. So I focused on these tasks that I think a lot of us do when we are entering into a new role and in a new institution, building relationships, listening to conversations. I attended various meetings in the libraries and on campus, and I also observed others teaching and service. These, again, were more tangible, having something on my calendar, like I have this committee meeting to go to observe what goes on. I walk across campus this afternoon to learn more about the new general education requirements. I'm watching this person in my department teach today. Those were more tangible things that I could point to, but I still didn't really feel like I was contributing. And of course, enter a project. I thought a project must be the answer. I really wanted something to contribute. And instead of sitting with the discomfort of reflecting and not having something to contribute yet, which was completely normal for my position, and was completely normal for building a role, I was just really eager to get started and contribute something. As a tenure track faculty member, I also knew that I was going to be required at some point to do research. So I wanted to work on a project that I could turn into research in the future. So I did what I knew, and I thought back to graduate school and the capstone project I had done, which was an online place to share lesson plans and activities. It was kind of like a repository. It was built in Omeka, and this is just what I did for my graduate school capstone. I thought something similar could be useful at UT because instruction happens across multiple libraries and departments. And I thought a space like this would be a good place for getting ideas for instruction and then starting conversations about teaching. I just see this comment in the chat. Here's the link again for my slides. So yeah, I was trying to get ideas from a previous project that I had done. And I wasn't really thinking about ties to my position or how it would be useful on a larger scale, but I had a lot of enthusiasm and I just wanted to get started. So during those first 6 months, I really dug in. I was brainstorming what the space could look like. I worked on a literature review. And I also reflected on that capstone and thought about what elements I could bring over from that project. I even started drafting a potential publication from my capstone, just really dove in. Once the spring semester began, though, I was focused more on librarian work. So instruction, I began service on committees. I volunteered for a grant project proposal. So I now had these other tangible things to work on and put this project on the back burner. That more concrete work had started, and to be quite honest, this project did not have a lot of meaning or purpose. So I was trying to cling on to this as a concrete way to make sense of my job, but it didn't have a lot of meaning, so I kind of set it aside. Even with the stalled project, though, I was able to make some sense of my position after 6 months of thinking and discussing and reflecting. With all of the work that I did, learning about my position and institutional needs, all of that brainstorming and reflecting, all of the discussions, I really began to envision my role as a bridge between online and in-person instruction. As I mentioned before, my job does not look like a typical online learning librarian job, and we already had somebody in the institution, in the libraries, who was doing that work. So I was trying to figure out where I fit, and this idea of a bridge seemed to work well with what the institution needed, and then my values, and was a way for me to incorporate my interest in pedagogy and my identity as a teacher. I would be able to focus on teaching and how we teach, and then I would also be able to continue my work of seeing instruction from multiple perspectives and making those connections. I was able to update my position description in 2020 with language that reflected this vision. On the slide here is an excerpt from my PD, and this is, I think, one of the first couple of sentences, and I just changed the beginning of the sentence. So now it reads, "This position acts as a bridge between online and in-person learning and instruction, and participates in instruction and engagement initiatives that advance the teaching and research missions of the libraries and university." So being able to really understand and visualize my role as a bridge and have that vision and put that into words in my position description felt really good. And I was really excited and motivated to move into the next 6 months of my position with a clearer understanding of where I fit. My department head and I had a 6-month check-in, and we were really excited and motivated to see where this vision would take us in the libraries. And then the world changed. So I'm going to talk now about that change and how I've navigated my role over the past year and how the Bridge project kind of came about within this new environment. So we actually transitioned into remote work on my 6-month anniversary. My last full day working on campus, when I had that 6-month check-in with my supervisor, that was at the very end of my first 6 months. So I have been working remotely for over a year now, twice as long as I worked on campus. I'm sure if any of you have started work in the past couple of years, you were probably in the same boat. And this was really jarring for me because I was just beginning to understand my role. I was just feeling more confident. I had made connections. I was finally able to connect some dots. Things were clicking in my head. And then they said, go home and stay home. And I really struggled again with not feeling like I had much to do and much to contribute. And I was also really struggling with traditional ideas of productivity. I had already been doing a lot of the reflective work and had found a definition and was ready to do something. And then the world was forced to slow down. I also didn't know quite how to contribute in this world that was now immediately zoomed in on online learning. It was an interesting time to start an online learning position. And again, to start an online learning position that was an addition to an existing one. Pretty soon into working from home, I knew that I needed something else to focus on that would help me maintain my vision for my position. And that would give me some momentum and motivation, and that would also be useful for the libraries. So that's when I started revisiting this project. This time, though, I started to explicitly think about it as a reflection of my position. The pandemic gave a new context for this virtual space focused on teaching. I did not think of this project as a way to fix something because of the pandemic, but our switch to remote work really provided a new context. And I think, as a lot of us saw, highlighted an existing gap. Our move to remote work really showed the need for being able to continue conversations and connect about instruction in a way that wasn't just in person. I also thought about this project as an opportunity to really illustrate how online and in-person teaching can influence each other and work together. And I could make those connections for other people while creating something that would be immediately useful, creating something tangible. I also envisioned this project as an online facilitation space for all methods of instruction. This is a way to think about the online teaching and learning space as more than just a teaching space or more than just an LMS or tutorials. And because of the nature of my position, I was able to think more broadly about online learning and kind of experiment and think about what else could we do here. I also saw this project as useful, like I said, during the pandemic, but I knew that it would also be helpful once we were transitioning back. And it filled an existing gap that was now more obvious because of our new living and working situations. So now I'm going to spend some time talking about the project and what it is, and give you kind of an overview of what it does, what the goals were. I'll show you some screenshots of what it looks like, just so you can understand what the project is as I talk about making ties to my position in a few minutes. So it's called the Teaching Bridge at UT Libraries. It's nicknamed the Bridge. That's what I will call it going forward. I called it the Bridge, yes, because of the direct tie-in to my position, but honestly, I had been watching a lot of Star Trek, the original series, and I really liked the idea of a command center and like somewhere you went to get information. And again, it happened to tie in my position, so I ran with it. So it's called the Bridge. So the Bridge is an internal virtual space for anyone involved or teaching or interested in teaching at UT Libraries. I created it in Google Sites, and it's essentially a place to share and find instruction resources. I will talk more about what those look like in a minute and what that includes. Ideally, the Bridge is a reflection of how we teach at UT Libraries and what our interests are in terms of instruction. I really wanted to be careful that this site didn't look like, oh, this is how Grace teaches, with a few other resources thrown in. As I mentioned before, something that I value is collaboration and bringing others into the conversation. So that's why I solicited content from others and have encouraged other people to keep submitting their own resources. This is also why I wanted to create a local site for instruction. I do know that other projects exist, like the ACRL Framework Sandbox, Project Cora, Primo, these much larger, essentially repositories for instruction materials. I knew that those existed, but I really liked the idea of having something that was local, that could be growing and organic and would be a real authentic representation of what instruction looked like for us. The Bridge is also a place that I thought could start conversations about instruction in the libraries. I personally think that teaching is greatly improved when we talk about it and when we share our experiences and ideas with each other. And as I mentioned before, teaching happens across a lot of departments and across branch libraries at UT. So I wanted to create a site and a space that was shared, that all of us would be able to access, and that would be a place where we could all share how we were teaching, get ideas for that, and maybe start conversations about that, how we might teach, our experiences with teaching, our experiences using and adapting the resources. So I was hoping that it would be a springboard for some of those conversations. I had 4 goals when I was creating the bridge site. The first one was just sharing resources by providing access to teaching and learning materials. The second was providing ideas by sharing materials for a variety of topics, library specific topics, research skills, and also information literacy concepts, and also providing ideas for a variety of different learning environments. So not only teaching in person, but also ideas for teaching online. The third goal was to build community by reflecting our local context and really representing how we at UT Libraries participated in instruction. And then finally, the last goal was to encourage discussion, like I said, among those of us who are interested and involved in instruction by inviting us to use each other's resources and then learn more about how our colleagues approached instruction. So that's kind of an overview of what the bridge is. And I also have shared goals. And so now I'm going to show you some screenshots of the site and talk a little bit more about how it's organized and how it functions. So here is the first image. If you can see that Star Trek original bridge peeking out at the top, I did use that. This is a nerdy site. Star Trek is here, but it's fun, and I enjoyed having something to tie in that I think other people would also have resonated with and maybe gotten excited about. If they aren't excited about teaching, they might be excited about Star Trek. So anyways, this is the first image. If you've used Google Sites before, this might look familiar to you, but it is built in Google Sites. So we're able to easily store and share resources in Google Drive, as well as embed outside content like YouTube videos. So this is an example of one of the types of resources that are available on the Bridge site. It has resources for introducing students to the libraries. So the image you're looking at here is the Learning the Libraries page. It has an overview of resources, a table of contents, and then some UT Libraries specific resources. These materials are for introducing students to library spaces and services, whether they're undergraduates, graduates, wherever they are. The 2 examples you can see peeking out here are a 10 things video from our marketing department, and then also a recorded workshop introducing students to the libraries. These resources are primarily for orientations, partial one-shots in classrooms, department meetings, things like that. So anytime anybody needs to introduce the libraries and what we do, they can come here and find something that will work for their students. I see a question in the chat asking, why did I use Google Sites over LibGuides? And at my institution, we're actually looking at LibGuides and talking more about how we're using them, why we're using them, what's useful for LibGuides. And I think that the idea of using LibGuides was I think we've all used LibGuides, most of us have, if not all of us. And we already knew that that was possible. And so I wanted to experiment with something else and see what else was possible and see if we could do something. I also liked the ability to use Google Drive and have things directly embedded. And then I also really liked being able to change the way that the Google site looked, and it has some searching functionality that I think might be a little bit different from LibGuides. So that's why I ultimately decided to use that. I have another question asking if I'm able to share the URL for the Bridge site. I am not. It is internal, and that's one of the things that might change in the future, but for now it's internal and requires authentication. I did, however, create a virtual poster for the ACRL distance and online learning section, and I had a video walkthrough of the site on that. So if anyone is interested in that, I don't have the link for that right off the top of my head, but let me know if you want it at some point, and I can figure out how to share it with you. So other resources on the site are over information literacy concepts and research skills. The second image is the information value page, which is one of 6 pages that look like this. Like the previous page, it has an overview of resources, a table of contents, and then resources on teaching information access and citation. Those are 2 topics that are underneath the general concept of information value. These resources also have little blurbs next to them, giving them a quick summary and suggestions for how they might be useful in different instruction environments. As I said, there are 6 pages that look like this, and these are highlighted resource pages that are a good place to start. So if you're needing to teach a lesson on searching and you want new ideas for how to talk about keywords, there might be another resource for you to look at on the searching page that you could kind of go to that page, look around and see what else exists. And those would be some good starting points for you. The other broad topics are authority, information creation, inquiry, scholarship, and searching, like I just mentioned. And those probably sound familiar to you. All of these pages are organized by a CRL frame, and each page is focused on a different frame. This picture that you're seeing now is the landing page for those highlighted resources. And on this page, people can just find a little bit more about what is included under each of those larger concepts. This page has 6 boxes, and each box underneath has a description of potential topics for each frame. I was taught information literacy instruction through the ACRL framework. I am a child of the framework and was not familiar at all with the standards. I didn't hear about the standards, I think, until after having taught for maybe a couple of years. So this is just what I knew, and this is how I organized the site. This is just an initial foundation for organization, and it could definitely change as people submit more resources and we use the site more. Again, I want it to really authentically represent how we teach at UT. And if we're not really viewing things through the framework, or this is not a useful organization, then I want to be willing to change that. And someone posted the link to the virtual poster session in the chat. Thank you so much. So yeah, if you want to see a video walkthrough, there's a link to some interactive slides from that DOLS virtual poster session. And there's a quick 2 or 3 minute walkthrough video that you can look at if you want more information and you want to look a little bit more at how this looks. So there's also a place on the site where people can explore all of the resources that others in the libraries have contributed. And this page, I think, does look different from the walkthrough page. I've changed it a little bit since I recorded that walkthrough, if you decide to look at that. And this final image is just the Explore All page. So this is where all of the other resources that are not included on any of those highlighted resources pages, this is where people can find, and they can pretty much just browse any resources for any topic. The ones pictured here are general resources, like there's a basic lesson plan template. And then there are also topical resources, like a video tutorial on psych info. The Bridge site has resources like all of these that were created and have been used by those in UT libraries. But there are also some CC licensed materials on the site, just to give some variety, and also some of us teach using CC licensed materials. So we wanted to include some of those on the site as well. So that gives a quick basic overview of the site, and I'm happy to answer questions about it at the end of the session. So if you have other questions about the Bridge site, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. So I'll be able to answer those at the end. And again, that link to the poster session is in the chat if you want to a little bit more of a deep dive into what this project actually looks like. Now that I've given an overview of the project, I do want to briefly discuss how it ties in with my position. And I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the timeline. So as I discussed at the beginning of the session, I thought a little about this project in my first 6 months, but not in a way that was actually meaningful or fleshed out or helpful. It was helpful in knowing that I did not need to continue with the project the way that I was thinking about it, but it wasn't going to be helpful for my library. So I did begin the initial brainstorming for this newer, more purposeful project in spring of 2020, a few weeks after we started remote work. I spent the summer fleshing out the purpose, writing goals, thinking about organization and choosing the platform. Fall 2020 was spent creating the site, adding content, discussing the project with my department head, my department and others in the libraries, and also getting feedback. In the winter of 2020, I made some changes to the site, and then I sent out a call that asked UT Libraries faculty and staff to submit resources that they used or created for instruction. And then I published the bridge a little less than a month ago in the spring of 2021. So this session is not just about this project, right? It's about the project in relation to my position. And I wanted to spend some time really fleshing out how it relates. So once I reframed this project and had a new reason for it, I worked to intentionally see it as a reflection of my position. I used it not only to give me some focus in a very confusing time, but also as a tangible way to meaningfully contribute and in a way that was unique to my role. There are a lot of direct ties from the bridge to my position, including the name of the site, which I've already talked about. Other similarities include drawing on both in-person and online instruction, connecting those who teach, curating a collection of resources for instruction, and also focusing on the how and the why of teaching online. I was also able to really center my values when creating this project. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I very much view myself as a teacher first, and I really bring that perspective to my work. The bridge was a project that allowed me to focus on teaching in a way that made sense for my position and that also met a library need. I also value collaboration and finding ways to share power. I really appreciated this in our first session from LIT on Monday, when Laura and Melissa were talking about their community of practice and the idea of sharing power intentionally. And I wanted to make sure that this project was built fully in collaboration and that it gave others opportunity to share what was useful and meaningful for them. Again, not just what I thought was helpful or the way that I taught. Having discussions with my department and asking for contributions and feedback from library colleagues has really helped me to share power in this project, and I hope that I can continue to do that. Finally, as I said, I'm always reflecting and questioning how and why we do what we do, and I think the bridge really encourages this by providing different ideas, methods, and perspectives in teaching. Hopefully, by providing this variety, it encourages those of us who use the site to think more about how and why we teach and to be open to continued reflection and trying new things. I want to end by sharing how I'm moving forward as I've published this project, and then also what I'm continuing to learn as I am still navigating and building this role that is new to me and new to the libraries. First is the future of the project. So as I said, I published the site and shared it internally mid-May, so it is still brand new. The plan is to see how others use it and contribute to it over the next year. I do have a submission form on the site as well as a feedback form. So I'm hoping that as people use the site, they'll submit their own resources, they'll provide feedback, and I can really start to see how this project can continue to grow and really work for the libraries. I also want to do more formal assessment in the form of surveys, maybe take that feedback form, make it into a more formal survey, and potentially do interviews or focus groups to see what changes need to be made. There's also the potential for expansion, but for now, I'm excited just to see how others use it internally and how we shape it with our contributions. To close, I want to share 3 things that I'm still learning and will continue reflecting on as I navigate and build this position. First, I'm learning that when done intentionally, projects can help create structure, focus, and meaning in broad positions, and emphasis on intentionally. When I first started my role, I was overwhelmed and spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the scope of my position was and where it fit and what was necessary, how I should approach it. The Bridge Project has really helped me say, this is where I fit and this is what I bring to the table in this role. And it's been really helpful with that. And I'm interested to see how I will continue to use this project and potentially others as a way to advocate for myself and my vision for this position. Second, I'm learning as both a person and a professional that things change, and that's okay. I talked a little bit in the beginning about how I was really uncomfortable and I didn't want to sit with the discomfort of not understanding quite what my role was. And I'm learning over the past year to just continue sitting with that discomfort, and that change is inevitable. As I know it's true for some others, and I've seen in the chat throughout this session, my full-time experience in library so far has just been one of change. 6 months into a new role, I had to transition into remote work and learn how to navigate an increased need for my role. Now, a year and a half into my position and a year into remote work, I will soon be transitioning back onto on-campus work. And we'll have to learn how to navigate that space again while staying true to my vision for this role and also allowing for necessary change. So I have to remind myself that even though my position and my role may change, I can still find ways to make my role meaningful. And I need to have grace with myself when things change. And finally, I have defined persistence for myself as finding ways to honor my values and identity in my work. As a person, I need to feel purpose and meaning in what I do. And in my professional life, I can create that meaning by incorporating my values and centering my identity as a teacher. This project was a concrete way for me to do both of those things, and it really helped me keep going during this time. I was grateful to be able to take the time to learn what persistence meant for me, but I want to emphasize I did not do this in a vacuum. I was supported in this work by my library and my department head. I have been supported in the past year and encouraged to take care of myself and put my health and safety first, which has given me space to rest when I need it, and therefore has helped me continue to be motivated and find ways to create meaning. Also, I was not asked to create this project in addition to other things. This was not a do more with less situation, as resilience and persistence often are. Knowing what keeps you going can definitely help in persistence, but I also know there are more pieces to the puzzle that are necessary for that to happen. So I do want to keep reflecting on what persistence means and make sure that I'm advocating for others to be able to do this work as well. So thank you all so much for listening to my experience, for learning about this project, for attending this session. I really appreciate it. If you have questions now, like I said, I'm happy to answer them. I've also included my email and Twitter handle if you have questions or want to connect after today. I will pop my video back on. And yes, I do see the questions in the Q&A. So I will pop my video back on. I will start answering those. And if you have other questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat. Lindy.
Yeah, I was just going to pop in real quick again. I know the standard sessions were listed as being about 50 minutes, so I understand some participants will have to step out now. So thank you all for attending. We'll be back tomorrow. We've actually got a session, our sessions tomorrow at 11 a.m., 1 and 3 p.m. Eastern again, but we are having a coffee break at 10 a.m. tomorrow, which will be just like an informal sort of get together if anyone's able to join for that tomorrow. So watch out for an email with the links in the morning tomorrow, and we hope to see some of you again then. And yeah, if there are other questions, feel free to stick around for a little while. Thank you very much, Grace. This was excellent.
Yeah, thank you. All right, yeah, if I will definitely answer these questions. Yes, feel free, take care of yourself. If you need to skedaddle, please do. We're still recording, so so these will be on the recording later if you want to hear answers to questions. So one question is let me move this window. How did you get the site under the university credentials? Did you have to work with IT to get this done? The answer is we did not have to work with IT. We have an institutional connection with Google Drive. So everybody has a Google account through the university. So because it's Google, all I had to do was update the sharing words. Basically, I just had to, when I shared the link and created the link for the published site, all I had to do was say, like, it's restricted to University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So you have to log in and authenticate that way. What has your process been to encourage use of the Bridge platform, including both uploading of materials and use of them? Do others have permissions to upload materials directly? What kind of materials, such as videos, handouts, forms, etc., seem to be the most uploaded and or most used? I ask because we have an internal repository of instructional materials, but very few folks submit, and there seems to be minimal usage by others. I guess a related question is there a way to track usage? Thank you for this question. I think this is the main question. And because this project is brand new, this is not something that I've had to deal with too much yet, but am anticipating dealing with this, and it's something I've been thinking about the whole time. So I can say that for uploading materials, like I said, I sent out a call in November or December, so right around winter time in 2020, asking for people to share resources. And I got a couple, but not a lot. So I then switched to a targeted approach. So I looked at gaps in resources in the site and asked people directly, like people that I know are interested in instruction and people who had expressed interest in the site. I asked if they had things that they would be willing to submit on whatever topic. And that worked really well. So that's what I did. I also, let me see. There are not permissions. So again, this is one of the reasons why I think Google has been really interesting to work with, is that on the submission form, I have, there's a link out to basically an openly shared Google folder where they can just dump stuff. They have to fill out the form and tell me like what it is, but they can dump stuff into that folder. And I don't know, I can't remember. I'm assuming they have to authenticate for that as well, be logged into their UTK net ID, but they can just dump that and then I can upload it onto the site. So like the organization still goes through me, but people can dump things into that folder as is necessary. And what kind of materials seem to be the most uploaded? We have a lot of workshop recordings currently, a lot of things that have existed. So like I mentioned, a lot of my job is curation, like seeing what we have and trying to figure out the best way to use it. And so this past academic year, we switched from doing one-shots to doing synchronous workshops. And we recorded all of them and we have YouTube playlists. And so I kind of popped those in again in the gaps and kind of provided some ideas of, you know, like you can use this as pre-work for an instruction session. If you want to spend time in class, you know, focusing on a skill, have them watch the workshop and get some more information and then focus on doing the skill in class, stuff like that. So right now there are quite a few videos and workshop recordings. And yeah, we'll see what the usage looks like. To be continued. And then how would you expand the bridge? We've talked about the potential of adding in other institutions, making it regional potentially. Oh, thank you so much. We've talked about making it regional, adding in institutions that we partner with, maybe local community colleges. So we might do that. So there are a lot of opportunities for expanding. And like I said, there are much larger, not quite local repository type things. Yeah, it would be a neat system project. um, for sure. So yeah, I don't know, maybe it'll be a system thing. I don't know. We'll see. But that's kind of, there's a lot of possibility for expansion. And then how much did you have to pitch this project to your boss and boss's boss? Were you pretty much given free rein? Great question. I would say, so this was pretty much work with me and my direct supervisor, my department head. So I went to my department head and was talking about this project. She thought it would be useful. And that was pretty much it. I ran things through her, but because it's internal, I don't have to do a lot of run through marketing or anything like that. If we went outside, it would probably need more levels of approval. So yeah, I would say I was pretty much given free rein. My assistant dean has seen it and knows about it, and thought it was a good idea and was really excited about it. So they knew about it, but there wasn't a lot of micromanaging. It was pretty free. And I think also the fact that its potential for research gave it a little bit of gave me a little bit more free rein than maybe I would have had in a different time. And one more quick question. How do you plan to encourage use by teaching librarians? Also planning on giving to faculty for embedding pieces in LMS. Yeah, we could do something similar for faculty. So we've been doing a lot of work in Canvas. That's our LMS, as I'm sure a lot of people have. And I also worked on a collection of teaching resources for like teaching faculty. That was another project I did earlier on in the summer. And that just lives on our library website for now. So we've thought about similar things for faculty, but this project specifically is for librarians. And I won't say just librarians, because it's anybody in the libraries who are interested in or who teach. And our titles are all pretty different. So just internal to the libraries. And then how do you plan to encourage use by teaching librarians? Yeah, I think encouraging use again is something that we're gonna have to keep thinking about. But I'm hoping, especially as we start moving back to campus and we see each other, that I can talk about it. I've talked about it at larger meetings of people who teach. So I've put the idea in people's heads. They know it exists. I emailed it out. We're going to try to find a centralized place to put it on the library website, so that librarians can find it really easily. And we might potentially be incorporating it into some research assistance training workshops this summer. So just trying to start including it in the regular everyday prep for instruction that we already do. So thank you all so much for the questions, all the discussion in the chat. I really appreciate it. Apologies for going over time, and I thank you for sticking around if you're still here. And yeah, thank you all so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your Tuesday afternoons.